Welcome to the Actually I Can Female Entrepreneur podcast. I am your host, Kaylee Greenacre, a business strategist, coach, TEDx speaker, author, and your go-to woman for all things business strategy. I am obsessed with supporting female entrepreneurs to grow unstoppable six and multi-six-figure businesses that they love, giving them the freedom and life that they desire. During this podcast, I'll be sharing with you everything that you need to become a successful female entrepreneur, from the mindset shifts to sales and marketing strategies and how to become an iconic leader that people can't get enough of. It is my mission to help you stand out, attract your dream clients and customers, and sell out of your offers with ease whilst building the business and life of your dreams. Let's make this your reality, ladies. Hello, ladies, and welcome to another episode of Actually I Can, the Female Entrepreneur podcast. And I'm joined today by the fabulous Sophie Milliken, who is a multi-award-winning businesswoman. And I'm super excited to be diving into holistic visibility with her today. Sophie, it's an absolute pleasure to have you here.
Thanks for having me. Excited to chat to you today.
I can see that Sophie and I are in our little podcast areas, and she's got the most incredible podcast studio that I'm looking at right now. So I'm just really, really excited to have this conversation with you and to find out all about holistic visibility, which I believe is going to really help our listeners. So before we dive into the topic, would you be willing to share with our listeners a little bit more about your personal journey as a business entrepreneur?
So this is all, as you get older, this becomes one of those questions that it takes ages to answer. So I will try and be succinct. I had a very traditional background. My parents had very normal jobs. My mum was a teacher and then became a care worker a bit later on. And my dad was a structural engineer. So I had no obvious role models in my life in terms of entrepreneurship. So obviously the role models in other ways, but there was no one in my family that had ever had a business before. So I took that kind of traditional route, did the GCSEs, did the A-levels, went to uni because that was kind of what was expected. And I'd wanted to be a fashion buyer. That was my big thing. I thought, it would be really glamorous and exciting. I'll travel the world and buy beautiful things. And within week one of being at uni, bearing in mind I'm from Newcastle and I'd gone to Leeds for uni, which felt big because Newcastle's a very compact city, everything you can walk between. Leeds felt like that huge step up because everything was more spread out. But in week one of being at uni in Leeds, I found out that to be a fashion buyer, I needed to move to London. And the thought of that at age 19 or whatever I was when I went to uni just horrified me. So I very quickly decided that wasn't going to be for me. And then when I had a brilliant job when I was at uni, I used to run a VIP bar within one of these super nightclubs that was the in thing in the late 90s, early noughties. I've got lots of stories about wild things I've seen famous people do. But I'll probably not share those on this podcast for fear of being sued. But I did see lots of things. And then I ended up applying for the local graduate scheme for John Lewis, but specifically for the Newcastle store. Managed to get in to that, which was amazing. Did loads of different departments within John Lewis Newcastle, got to about 25, 26 years old, fell into HR, still at Newcastle, and then got this tap on the shoulder to say, you now need to move branches if you want to progress your career, because I'd got up to sort of a management level. So I went down to London, which I smile about and laugh about now because obviously I hadn't wanted to do that, but it felt less scary, I guess, by that point. Still didn't have any major life responsibilities. I hadn't, bought my flat by that. Or maybe I had bought my flat, actually. I think I'd just bought the flat and I rented it out. And but that was the only tie that I really had to Newcastle at that point. So took a 6 months secondment, but I knew that I wouldn't be back to John Lewis Newcastle. So it felt quite emotional to make that move down there. So I did 6, 7, 8 maybe years down in London, most of which I lived there. I ended up doing a master's while I was down there that John Lewis sponsored me to do, which was amazing. And then I also ended up in my last job there, I was head of graduate recruitment, which was a super cool role because it got me outside of the John Lewis bubble. All my previous roles at John Lewis before then had been very, very insular. So it was fun to do some external networking. I then had moved back to Newcastle, was commuting down to London, which sounds wild. I only did it once a week, so it wasn't as wild as that sounds. But I'd got married, I'd had my daughter, she was a baby, and they announced what was the first of what's been about 50 restructures since, and my team were moving out to Bracknell. Now, Newcastle to London wasn't too bad, but Newcastle to Bracknell was not doable. It would have had an extra 2 hours on the journey. They wanted me to be more present in terms of sat at a desk 5 days a week, whereas at that point I was doing 2 days from the office, 2 days from home with a Friday off. So I was doing this compressed hours thing, which was quite modern for then. And I just thought, it's not for me. It's time to go. I looked for jobs back in Newcastle that were a similar type of job and a similar pay grade because I was on a lot of money at this point, and I couldn't find any. So I ended up having a chance lunch with a guy that was commuting from just outside of Leeds down to London to Canary Wharf for one of the banks. And he was telling me that he was thinking about leaving the bank and setting up his own business. And I look back and I think, God, we were quite reckless because I'd been with John Lewis for 13 years by that point. He'd been with the bank for over 20 years. And literally over lunch, we decided to set this business up together. So we set the business up, and it was a graduate recruitment and employability consultancy. So what that actually means is that we used to design assessment processes for big companies like M&S, AXA, Expedia. And then we used to do a lot of work with universities where we used to prepare their students for graduate jobs. And we did that with a really unique method in that we used to hire out football stadiums and put hundreds of students through these mock assessment centres. So we would have the students arrive in the morning, they'd be super nervous, super quiet. They'd go off into the different boxes and move around, and they would do like a group exercise, an interview, maybe a presentation or a case study. And then they'd get feedback at the end of that. So then this improved their confidence. It meant that they could compete more effectively when they were going for the real thing. And that business just grew and grew. My business partner had left a couple of years in, so I ended up owning that business outright quite early on. And actually the point where he left was when the business really started to scale up and we were winning these really big contracts. Now, what I was doing alongside that, which wasn't a plan or a strategy at that point, was actually all the stuff that we're going to talk about around this holistic visibility concept. So we would always go for awards. Awards was always really good for us because our clients like that. So awards was always part of our marketing strategy. But the real game changer for me actually came when I wrote my first book. So the first book was for students to help them get a graduate job, so super relevant to what I was doing. We did a book launch in Newcastle, a book launch in London, and that was the catalyst. One of those launches, I got offered 2 TEDx talks. I'd never, this is quite embarrassing, ever watched a TEDx talk at this point, which I feel very guilty about now that I'm really into them. And I just said yes to the first one, figure it out, or say yes. So this was like my plan in that it wasn't a plan. I would get offered something and I'll go, yep. And then I would figure out how to do it. So off the back of the TEDx talk, I got offered a column in a careers magazine. I got some TV stuff, some radio stuff. So it was all this snowball effect. My LinkedIn started doing really well. That's a big platform for me. So all these different things. So then fast forward a couple of years, I got approached to sell the business. The sale took ages to go through. I sold it, stayed on to do my earn out, then hated it and left. And that was quite painful. And then I had to work out what I was going to do, because when you sell a business, you have a million things that you're not allowed to do. So I couldn't operate in the same market for however long. And I had a chance conversation with a business friend of mine who's like, what are you going to do? And I was saying to her, you know, the thing that made that business really scale up quickly was actually when I became the face of the business, if you like, because it spotlighted the business really well. What I found was that when I was going to have sales conversations with prospective clients, they felt like they knew me already because they'd seen me at one of these things. It then made those conversations super, super easy because they knew they were going to buy. They'd already decided that they were going to buy before we even sat down. So it made sales really easy and it created really fun opportunities. So I was telling her, I think there's an idea around how we do that for other people. So that kind of brings us up to date, and we're a few years in terms of having Moja now. And we basically do that as a proper strategy with a proper plan for our clients. That's a very long answer.
No, but it's amazing. And what an incredible journey. And I really like
everything that you've said there, but I like how you've kind of moved and developed your own skills, your own expertise. And then obviously you're now in charge and have the most incredible business that now supports people with getting visible, supports businesses and their brands, and really, accentuating those. And I'm really, really excited to dive into this in a little bit more depth today, because I do think that visibility is so, so important for any brand, whether they're a personal brand, an individual brand, a multi-brand. So let's dive into this topic. What exactly is holistic visibility for brands or individuals? How do we define this?
So for me, it is different between a personal brand and a company brand. And I think we're in an age now where you have to have a personal brand. And you have one, actually, whether you like it or not. We've all got one. It's what people say about us when we're not there. It's how people describe us to others. And I think the most clever business owners now are really focused on that in an authentic, hate that word, but in an authentic way, because it spotlights the business. Because as individuals, we are naturally more interesting. Even though we think our businesses are brilliant, and they are, we bring those to light with our personalities. So let's make the most of them. Now, for me, it's not about social media. People get distracted around, I've got to be visible. It's being on social media all of the time. For me, that's actually the last bit, because what happens if someone is thinking about working with you, Kaylee, they're going to Google you, right? They're going to look you up online and they're going to see what's there. So if you've had a banging, Instagram's probably your platform, right? So you might have had a banging link, Instagram post the day before or something that might pop up and it'll have all these likes and comments and stuff. But that soon fades down on the whole Google thing. So yes, your Instagram profile will be probably quite high up if we were to Google you right now, but it doesn't show you all those posts that have done really well. So they have a limited shelf life. Instead, what pops up on Google is the stuff that's got the substance and the quality to that content, that richness of that content that you can then talk about using social media. So for me, it's things like, it is awards, good quality awards, not scammy ones, because there's plenty of those around. It's awards, it's books, it's speaking, it's events, it's podcasts, it's networking. It's all of these things that work together to create your brand. And the ideal is someone Googles you and it's all your content that's popping up there, all stuff that's linked to you. So it's going to be articles that have been in the press. There's going to be video clips. There's going to be all the stuff that I've described. And that is the substance that shows that Kaylee's the real deal. And it's not just your Instagram. Yeah. That's how I would describe it.
No, and this is fantastic and such a valid point, because it's really interesting that you say this, because I often Google myself, not to sound like an absolute crazy woman, but it's interesting and it's fascinating to see exactly what comes up. And exactly what you've just said, at the top of my list, other than my website, is my TED Talk, the features that I've been in, such as Hello Magazine, so looking at those different features, and also my book. And you're so right. Instagram, LinkedIn, all of the social medias, they're not actually at the top there. And I think, do you know what? This is a really good exercise for anyone to do listening to the podcast. Google yourself every now and then to see what is coming up at the top of the search, because I think this is just incredibly, it's a great insight, isn't it? To see ultimately what are people finding out about you. And if you've got awards and things like that, they are going to be seen higher up there in regards to, obviously what people are looking for, or ultimately what's going to be listed about you.
100%. It's a great exercise. And I would recommend doing it in an incognito browser as well, so that it doesn't just pick up on previous searches. And it is going through all of those tabs. So have a look on the images tab. Have you got current pictures? Is it obvious that it's still you? Have you got recent news coverage? Have you got press coverage on that news tab? So it is looking at all those things, because then it gives you a steer as to what's missing. You can also, I think it's quite interesting, if you've got a common name as well. So are you the top person for your name? Like, I would imagine you haven't got loads of competition for your name. I haven't either. I think there's a water polo player in Australia that I have to compete with. But, how can you knock them down a bit? Because ideally, the gold standard is you want to have a Google knowledge panel in your name to the right of your of your, when you look up your name on Google. So I've got one for mine, and you'll see links to the books, links to the podcast, podcasts, I think, are on there as well. So it's all these things that we all know as consumers are really good quality things we want to see on Google that show that you're genuine, show you're the real deal. These are all important things. So definitely there's no shame in Googling ourselves. It's a good thing to do because that's what our clients are doing.
Yeah, exactly that. No, I love this. So something that you touched on a few minutes ago was this whole concept around authenticity. And I want to dive into this a little bit more because I think, again, when it comes to visibility, when it comes to showing up, when it comes to doing anything for a business, I personally believe that one of the most important things is to be truly authentic and actually aligned with your values. So is there anything that you do to support your clients? Well, I know there are, but is there any advice that you could give our listeners of how they can become more visible whilst staying authentic and aligned with their values?
I think it's identifying what you stand for initially. So there's a really good exercise in my latest book, actually. The book's called From Unknown to Unforgettable, How to Build a Personal Brand That Goes Beyond the Bio. Maybe you can link it in the show notes. But there's a really good exercise in there around finding your strengths and identifying what you stand for. And I think once you do an exercise like that, it then almost becomes like your North Star and it guides you around, am I doing something? Am I saying yes to something that fits within my values and what I stand for? And if not, you'll probably get a gut instinct around, oh, this feels uncomfortable. And uncomfortable can be good sometimes. But when you've got the gut feeling around this feels wrong, you do need to listen to that because our guts are never wrong. So I think working out what you stand for, working out what your boundaries are, because I never used to post anything personal. When I first became a single parent when Jess was 2, I didn't tell anyone because I was paranoid that people would judge me. I had negative words that I would associate with the term single mom. So I worried people would judge me. And this is a long time ago now, so I'm clearly over it. But it just wasn't something I felt comfortable sharing until I did that TEDx talk 6 years ago. So things have changed for me. My boundaries now are I'm a lot more chilled. I'm a lot more don't really care what people think kind of thing. But we all do need to work out what those boundaries are and push them a bit if we can, if we feel comfortable with that. But then that's how we do it, because as long as we're not sharing anything or taking part in any activities, that sounds a bit dodgy, but like that make us feel, like we've compromised that in any way, then I think that's all completely fine. And that's how we should do things. And I think the other important thing to remember is that when someone is meeting you in real life, whether it be online, through Zoom, or whether it be an actual physical meeting, the person that they've seen on Google or on the socials needs to match the person that they're sat in front of. So again, this is something to come back to. And I think sometimes introverts find this quite hard. So they'll be kind of a bit over the top on video. And then they kind of think, oh God, that's not really me. So I think you do have to try and be as true to you as possible. A really good example I talk about quite often is Sarah Davies. So I know Sarah pretty well. She wrote the foreword for that book. She is, for me, the perfect example of what you see is what you get. Wherever she shows up, whether it's on her socials, whether it's on TV, whether it's in real life, she's exactly the same. And I think whatever our personalities are and whatever we stand for, we do need to be the same in all of these things, because otherwise, if the person you meet is not the same as that person online, it probably comes across as being inauthentic and then makes you not trust that person, which is not going to be great for doing business, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So that authenticity, it's really interesting what you say in regards to the different types of people, and especially in terms of being an introvert as well. So I'm an introvert myself. So I can completely align with what you're saying, especially when I first started to try to get visible and to film videos and things. Although I can naturally speak on stages and I feel quite comfortable doing that, when I was feeling kind of almost as if I was forcing myself in front of the camera to speak for a video for social media or for content, etc., it felt forced and it didn't feel as authentic as I wanted it to. So I had to do a little bit of work around that. But I think there's some real value what you've shared just there in regards to how people can kind of lean into that and make sure that everything is truly aligned with who they are and their values. So, so really thank you for sharing that. Would you say there are any common kind of blocks or fears that you come across when you're either working with clients or what you see online around visibility?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. I think there's one which frustrates the heck out of me, but we all have it, is imposter syndrome. So people thinking, oh, what are people going to think about me? I'm not good enough. I'm not as great as this person, blah, blah, blah. So I'd say that is one of the biggest. Then it's time. People not feeling that they've got the time to do all of these activities, and then therefore they are inconsistent and they don't see the results. So for me, they're probably the two biggest things. Sometimes I see people that are kind of the other extreme from imposter syndrome, who think that they're like the best thing ever and can't understand why they're not winning certain awards or whatever. That's quite an interesting challenge to deal with. But I would say overwhelmingly, it's more people that just don't have the confidence to put themselves. And I think actually they're probably my favourite people to work with, because I say to them, look, let us big you up, let us shake the pom-poms for you, and we'll do it and put that spotlight on you. And again, in that scenario, we'd probably be having to push them a little bit out of their comfort zone, because they'll be like, oh no, this isn't me. And then you see that they get a bit of progress and they start really relaxing into it a bit more and letting us go with it. So they would be the two things that I would say. And I think in terms of the time point, we can't all conjure up extra time. We've all got sort of the same, well, we haven't all got the same time, have we? We've all got different responsibilities. But I think don't use that as an excuse. Work out what you can do with the time that you've got. So focus on maybe one thing, or if you're thinking about social media, focus on one platform and do that well, or think about how can you batch stuff in a way that is natural and will work for you, or just having some kind of a plan. I was focused on being at events earlier this year, because I've noticed that if I don't get out and network, whether it's speaking at an event or attending something, if I have a few months where I've not really done much of that, I see the gap in our pipeline sales wise. So I created like a calendar, an events calendar, and just plotted in what I was doing throughout the year. And then I could see where the gaps were. And actually that helped me say no to some stuff where I was like, I'm already speaking 4 times that month. And see, March was always a really busy month for me. And that helped me say no, but then also helped me look at where those gaps were. So I think there's a few tips and tricks of things that you can do that are going to make the most of your time. And it's being sensible about what you say yes and what you say no to. But you've just got to start. We can all make excuses. And actually the time we spend moaning about not having any time, we probably could have done something that's going to get us closer to that goal anyway.
Absolutely. And I do you know what, I really align with what you said there in regards to sort of planning out and having a little look at ultimately, the next couple of months. And like you said, sort of going to events or speaking at events or networking or whatever it is, just thinking about what could you do, potentially a couple of things every month to kind of get yourself out there a little bit more, be seen, be more visible. And this leads on to, something that I was going to ask you, and you've partially answered this already, but I want to dive into this a bit more, because I feel like there's a lot of stress on us as entrepreneurs to be seen and be visible, but a lot of people interpret that as you have to show up on social media every single day, and that is the only way you're going to get visible. Is there any advice that you can give around this? And I know you've sort of touched on it a little bit there with, ultimately looking at different ways of how you can kind of get visible. And there are lots of different ways other than social media, but how can people really manage that? And also their expectations of having to feel as if they have to be on social media every single day?
So I think it is a feeling, and I think we see other people do that and we think we have to do that. And I think if you think about some of the biggest brands on social media, people like Stephen Bartlett, Gary Vee, they are not posting their own stuff, right? And they've got teams that create all this stuff. And Gary Vee's very clever, isn't he? Because he literally films his whole day, so chops it all up. So I think we can't compare ourselves with people that have got massive teams doing all that stuff behind the scenes. And I think the other key thing is to think about which platform is going to be your main platform, because I don't think you need to be on every platform. I think you need to do some analysis, look at the back end of things and look at where clients have come from to work out where you should spend your time. So for me, LinkedIn is my number one platform all day long. On a LinkedIn trainer business last year from Leah Turner. I don't know if you know Leah, but yes, bought her LinkedIn training business. And one of the things that I love about LinkedIn is you could get away with posting once a week and still be seen as ultra visible. People think I'm ridiculously visible on LinkedIn, and I post max twice a week. anyone could post twice a week. It's about posting at the right time. It's about posting the right kind of content. So for me, if LinkedIn is your main platform, you're on a winner straight away because you don't actually have to post that much. So I think there's that overthinking around how visible you need to be. My secondary platform, I'd say, is Instagram. I wouldn't say that I'm amazing at Instagram. I'm not consistent. The only thing I'm consistent with is I've always got stories on, and I find people do engage quite a lot with my stories, and I'll get DMs that lead to something. So if you look at the number of followers that I've got on Instagram versus LinkedIn, it's like a third of what I've got on LinkedIn, but I probably get as much in my DMs that's good quality as I do on LinkedIn, which is interesting. So maybe I should spend more time there. But I think people that spend all of their energy just on social media are kind of missing a trick, because I think that gives the impression potentially that you're a bit fluffy. So you're better off spending that time on writing the book or winning the award or speaking at the event, because again, it goes back to the quality of what you're sharing. So if you're one of these people that posts on Instagram 20 times a day, but you're just posting inspirational quotes or just fluff that doesn't do anything, what's the point? What's the point? There's loads of those. Whenever I see those, I just think, you're making no money. You've got now to talk about. You're making no money and you just post a load of rubbish to be seen. And I think good quality content lasts longer. And that's another reason why I like LinkedIn as well, because you can do a post. I mean, I did a post 3 weeks ago that I'm still getting alerts on. You don't get that on any other platform. I love LinkedIn. It's great.
It's incredible. But I really agree with you. I think absolutely it's about being a thought leader. It's about ultimately sharing, again, your vision, your values, your beliefs, your opinions. Otherwise, what is the point? And like I said, I do think there's a lot of pressure, or people put a lot of pressure on themselves because they see other people doing that particular thing. And so there will be some listeners listening to this podcast that are potentially in their first year of business. So therefore, they might not have won awards yet. They may not have yet had the opportunity to speak on stages. What advice would you give to those that are earlier on in their business about getting visible other than social media?
So if I was to rewind as to the things that did make a difference early on, I would say don't discount awards, because there's an award for whatever stage of business you're at. So some of the best awards are run by a lady called Fran James, who runs the Great British Entrepreneur Awards, which are classed as the Grammys of Entrepreneurship, according to Stephen Bartlett. And they are big awards. Now, they have a startup category, but the people that Fran and her team that run those awards, they also run the National Startup Awards. So these are a set of very credible regional and national awards that are for you in your first year of business. You don't even need to be making money. I see entries from people that are pre-revenue. So it's really interesting. And there's a category for everyone. So, and also you can only be a startup for so long. So if you're in year 1 or year 2 of business, you've only got a limit as to how long you can apply for those awards anyway. So I would say don't discount awards. I'd still do that. And then I would say, probably the other thing, if you're not used to speaking yet, go and get some practice in. Go and volunteer to speak at a school or a college or a uni or something, just to cut your teeth, because you do get more confident with speaking the more you do it. So go and practice your talks and get some experience, because the last thing you want is your first experience of doing a talk to be a really big stage and for you to screw it up because you're so nervous or you're not prepared properly. So go and practice. And then I think the other thing that I would be encouraging people to do early on is to do the book. You can do a book at any point. You need to obviously have some level of knowledge, but that's why you're doing your business. You have that knowledge. And I think people underestimate themselves and don't realize how much they actually really know. And once you've done the book, it just leads to so many other opportunities. It's easier to get on podcasts. It's easier to get paid to speak. It's easy, just every bit of having the book, the leverage that you can get, you can send it out to prospects. You can give it to clients as a welcome gift. There's so many things you can do with that, and people put it off. And I've never met anyone who said to me after they've done their book, "Oh, I wish I'd done that." They all say, "I wish I'd done that ages ago." So don't put it off. You can always do another book. You can do a second edition if you learn a load more stuff in the years after you publish that one. Do a second edition or do another book.
Incredible. I think it's really interesting. I think with the book concept, the amount of people that I speak to, and quite a few of my own clients say, "Oh, I really want to write a book." I'm like, write the book. Go out there and get that book written. And I do believe that, you're absolutely right. A book, you don't need to have an established business to write a book. Anyone can write a book, can't they? And can, again, share their opinions, some value of any description, whatever the topic is, of course. And that can get you so much visibility and credibility out there.
100%. I think the book's so important. And if you're not a confident writer, then make the use of a company like mine. Come on a writing retreat, get some help with the structure, get some feedback on the writing, or get someone to ghostwrite it. Even there's so many different ways that you can work on the book to get it out there. But I definitely do recommend working with someone. I know you can completely self-publish, but when I've seen people do that, there's always been some level of mistake. So I think even on a basic level, you want to work with somebody on that. So you will need some, even if it's a small budget, to have a good editor or a proofreader or something. But the book's amazing. It's the best business card you will ever have.
Yeah, absolutely. And so for those of our listeners who are potentially been in business a number of years, they're sort of looking to scale their business, they're, getting to multiple six or even seven figures. When it comes to holistic visibility, is there anything that you would say is an absolute must? I know we've talked about the books being really important, but is there anything else that you think absolutely, for anyone really wanting to get out there and to skyrocket or raise their visibility, this one thing is a must that they should do?
I think it's having a plan, so it's not scatterguns. So each year you're setting some kind of goals around where you're going to show up, how you're going to show up, having a strategy and a plan to it. So I think that's important. And also setting goals around that, because how are you measuring this? Is it in sales? Is it in opportunities? Because otherwise it can just be a bit of a vanity thing. Yeah. And then I think something more practical again, I think would be professionalizing certain elements of your visibility strategy. So speaking, for example, every time we take on a new client, people say, I want to get paid thousands of pounds to speak. And I go, right, okay. So have you been paid before? No. Or I've been paid 200 quid. Right, okay. Have you got a speaker reel? Have you got a speaker kit? Have you got something you would send to organisers? No. So I say to them, right, well, let's professionalise that. So we will create them a speaker website in their own name that has got all their testimonials. It's got links to their keynotes. It's got a speaker reel. It's got a contact form asking the budget question. So all these things, and then we'll do them a professional speaker kit, which will end up being a PDF that we can send to event organisers. There is a lot of competition at the moment for speaking, for paid speaking in particular. Therefore, you've got to have the slick assets that position you as that professional speaker, because why would an organizer pay you £5,000 to speak at something if you've never been paid to speak before and you've got no assets that show you as a credible speaker? So there's just a few quick wins there that I think can just shift that and up level your speaking game.
Amazing. Great advice. And one final thing that I want to sort of get your opinion on is obviously visibility, but in the future. We're currently in 2025. AI is massive at the moment and ultimately taking over the online space quite a lot. What are your predictions for businesses and for visibility over the next few years?
I think it means that personal brand or visibility is going to be even more important, because there is a lot of robotic content out there and there is a lot of sort of faceless stuff. So actually, how are you going to stand out even more? It is around our personalities, and it's not saying, oh, people are only going to work with you if they like your personality, but there is something around people just connecting with you, and it might be through something really simple, or, something that you've said or whatever it may be. It's building that connection with someone. And there's lots of stuff out there, isn't there, around how many touch points people need to see and hear from you to build that connection and to know, like, and trust you. Like, those are really important things when people are making buying decisions. So it's almost more important. Therefore, how can you put yourself out there even more to build those connections, build those relationships? So I think we're just going to see even more of that. And I think personal branding is still quite new, really. It's only been, who would be if we look back years ago in business, the big business names who still are big business names, they're just kind of getting on a bit now. Like people like Richard Branson and Alan Sugar, they were probably the first brands, if you like. Anita Roddick from Body Shop, this is years ago. But again, they would never have called it that. Whereas now everyone does have something. And you look at more recent ones, you've got people like Stephen Bartlett, who's smashed it and really built his fortune based on his personal brand, because I suspect he didn't have quite as much cash as he made out, but his brand has made him the cash. So I think it's become more commonplace. I would have felt really ick describing myself as having a brand or being visible. I would have been like, oh, that's really cringe. Whereas now it's just normal. It's just showing up. And actually, if you're not, you're missing out. So I think we're just going to see even more of it. And I think it's just going to be more and more.
Absolutely. No, thank you so much for your insights. And it's been an incredible conversation to have with you today. I know we could talk about this topic for a long time, but hopefully it's given our listeners some incredible takeaways and some key things to consider, especially when it comes to planning concepts, writing your book, getting yourself out there, considering speaking gigs, and so much more. So honestly, Sophie, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you here on the podcast. I've got one final question to ask you. When I ask all of my guest speakers this, or my fabulous guests, what is your one word of the year and why?
So this year for me, it's been flourish. And the reason for that has been, it's not just about business. So yes, I want the business to flourish and grow. It's been more of a personal thing as well around health. So, I'm in my mid-40s now and I'm really feeling it. And I read somewhere that when you hit 45 and 60, they're the two big ages where you really start feeling an impact on your health. And when I hit 45, I was just like, God, I just feel really old all of a sudden. Like my eyesight's really terrible, having been perfect till about 2 years ago. So all these things just make me feel a bit, ugh. So for me, it's been around, right, how do I be the healthiest I can be at my age and live a long and healthy life? So I've been doing lots of alternative type things. So the hyperbaric oxygen chamber I've been going to. There's one near our office. So that's been fun going there on a lunchtime. I've been doing the infrared saunas. I was already going to see a personal trainer, but I've now joined David Lloyd Centre as well. And I'm doing all the classes and things there. I'm walking more. I'm being more thoughtful around the food that I'm making. So yeah, just very mindful of all of those things and just trying to reduce stress levels as well, I guess, because I am a person that's got a lot on, I've got the business, but I also chair a charity and I've got a few non-exec roles as well. So I am always on the go and always busy. So it's trying to have a bit more balance, which is something I don't think exists. But I guess if you can be more intentional around those sorts of things, it's good. So that word has helped to anchor me with decision making this year.
Oh, I love that. I love the choice of word. Amazing. Sophie, it's been an absolute pleasure. Where can our listeners find you and connect with you?
So LinkedIn is my main platform, and also Instagram.
All of the links and details are in the show notes for everyone to listen to, or to find, should I say. Thank you, my lovely. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you here on the podcast. And thank you to everyone that's tuned in to today's episode. Please don't forget to rate, review and subscribe to the podcast. And I'll see you all again next time. Thank you for tuning in to the Actually I Can Female Entrepreneur podcast with me, your host, Kaylee Greenacre. If you are ready to build, grow and scale your dream six-figure or multi-six-figure business, then head to our website now for more information or connect with me on socials to see how you can create your dream business and dream life.